Hey guys, Jim here, coming at you live one more time from the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. Well, by way of my bedroom anyway, in this COVID environment that we have going on here. But anyway, this is another live and free Intrepid Adventures program. Now today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the jobs that the guys who made up the crew of Intrepid had on board the ship. But before we do that, this is, once again, live and free, but it does not come without a cost. So please consider supporting us. And if you want to do that, you can simply click on the link that my behind-the-scenes guy, Jonathan, has put up in the chat there. And that will be extremely appreciated, okay? Okay, so once again, jobs on deck. We're going to take a look at what kind of jobs that the guys on Intrepid used to do. In Intrepid's long history, specifically some of the smaller and maybe not everyday jobs that you and I think of when we talk about jobs and going to work, okay? But first, a quick refresher. That right there, whoop, is the Intrepid, okay? That's how it looks today. Get you a better look at that there. We are, once again, the Sea, Air, and Space Museum, floating right there on the Hudson River, located on the west side of Manhattan at the end of Pier 86. By the way, guys, tell us, say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're tuning in from. Tell us if you've ever been to Intrepid. Let us know if you plan on coming to the Intrepid. If you do and you see me, please come up and say hi. You know, you listen to my broadcast. I always like to hear those kind of things when I'm walking around during the workday. But what I want you to tell me now is if you remember what kind of a ship this was. Tell me in the chat. Let me know what kind of a role you think the Intrepid played in the U.S. Navy. It's pretty big. It's got a pretty flat top on the top there, which played an important role, actually a vital role in what it actually did and the purpose it's served in the Navy for the United States. If you were thinking that the Intrepid was a warship, that's true. That is technically true. If you are thinking, one of the most common answers I get, it's a battleship. Well, not really. A totally different kind of ship. If you are thinking it was an aircraft carrier, then you are absolutely correct. So the Intrepid was an aircraft carrier. The Intrepid, way before it became a museum, by the way, it became a museum in 1982. And that may start to give you guys some of the hints of what some of the jobs were on board Intrepid, okay? The Intrepid was commissioned back in 1943, and it looked like this, okay? When it served in World War II, the Intrepid served in the space race. The Intrepid served in what we call the Cold War, which I like to call the space race was a symptom of the Cold War. And again in the Vietnam War, and was finally decommissioned in 1972. And as I've already said, it's going to become a museum in 1982. Okay, if you, it's a pretty big place if you haven't seen it yet. If you ask the Intrepid to do a headstand and do a stand on its bow, it's going to raise today, it'll raise about 913 feet into the sky. And that's as high as some skyscrapers we have here in Manhattan, almost as tall as the Chrysler building, which is just over 1,000 feet tall. In World War II, we're talking more like 845 feet tall, which is still pretty long as well. Now, about sitting in the Hudson, as you saw it on that first slide, let me go back to it there for you. Sitting in the Hudson right there, it's about 9 stories tall, just doing that, okay? So a pretty big place. Okay, so looking at the World War II era Intrepid, which is what we have here in the picture, you can see a lot of things going on there on the top, on that flat top I told you about. You can see a lot of things on the top there, which kind of look like they're folded up nice and neat there. If you look real close, you can see small things. I'm going to highlight them here with my laser pointer. You see those small dots right there? That's some of the crew guys doing some of the jobs that we're going to talk about today, okay? So those things, of course, on top of the aircraft carrier are aircraft, okay? Very, very important. One of the roles that why have an aircraft carrier in the first place? Well, of course, we're talking about a floating airport, okay? So these aircraft can have a place to land, can be refueled. In time of war, they can be armed, and they can take off from that aircraft carrier. We're not going to build aircraft that are really big and take a lot of and use a lot of fuel to fly all the way from the United States over to another war that might be in World War II's case in Europe or Southeast Asia. So the aircraft carrier provides exactly that. The United States operates the most aircraft carriers of any other nation on Earth. Okay, let's start to think about jobs that the crew had while on board of Intrepid. I want you to start to imagine the Intrepid as another way you can look at it, besides a floating airport, a city at sea, okay? So I want you guys to think about your neighborhood. And what do you guys see when you leave your house, maybe every morning on your way to school? For those of you who are a little bit older, maybe on your way to work, some things that you might see on your way home. You know, you get off the train and you're walking to your apartment building or your house. What are some of the things that you may see? Just tell us right down there in the chat. What are some of the things that you see walking along through your neighborhood? Now, before you put it down, I know a lot of you see trees and grasses and parks. So hopefully you do. That's kind of nice. You're not going to see many trees and grass on an aircraft carrier, but everything else that you're going to tell me in the chat, you're going to see. For example, if you're thinking about, well, you pass some restaurants along the way, absolutely. And we'll talk about that towards the end of this presentation. Some of the jobs that the restaurants or the galleys here on Intrepid put some men to work cooking excellent meals, okay? If you're thinking about, well, I passed a doctor's office or two, absolutely, had those here on Intrepid as well, dentists as well, and we'll talk about those going on through the presentation at least a couple of times. Everything, my point here being, of course, everything you see on your way in your neighborhood, we have, and even had back as far as World War II when aircraft carriers were first really being used, had on board, okay? All right, so talking about jobs, let's take a look at this picture. I know what you're thinking, chairs, okay? How important are chairs? Why are you showing me chairs, Jim? How could that possibly tell you what jobs were like on the aircraft carrier? Well, it's pretty simple, okay? When you look at this chair exhibit, it will give you a nice cross section of the different roles and different jobs that the crew played on board. For example, I want you to tell me in this picture here, what chairs do you think, or what chair do you think was the single most common chair on Intrepid? Let's see, or something that maybe looks like an ordinary chair, something that maybe looks like it could have been in multiple places, something that could maybe be in multiple places today in some of those places that you see on your way to and from school or work. Another hint, it's the greenest chair, okay? If you said that chair right there, well, that's our most common answer on what would be the most common chair, okay? Where might this chair be used, okay? It looks like maybe some offices. By the way, one of the things that you guys might pass on your way to and from school or work, offices, had offices on Intrepid, absolutely, even as far back as World War II. In the mess hall, which are those restaurants we talked about, again, talk about them towards the end of the presentation, okay? Down in sick bay, which are the hospitals or the doctor's offices on board ships and the aircraft carrier, those chairs look like they could have been used there too. So the most common chairs. But I want you guys to tell me, what chair do you think was the most comfortable? Ooh, what chair was the most comfortable? It's, well, let's see. You're probably not thinking about the one right next to the common chair. We're going to talk about that one. Any ideas in the chat? I'll give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. So if you were thinking that chair might be the most comfortable, well, you'd be absolutely correct. Yeah, Holly Hines. The tan ones, yeah, very good. If you, I assume you meant those right there that the arrow is pointing to. So what do you think those chairs were used for? Or more importantly, who do you think was sitting in those chairs? What jobs do you think the guys had who sat in those chairs? Any guesses? Do you think that those were used In the sick bay, in the hospital, you think, oh, there you go. Hey, Jeff, fantastic. Nice to see you. Vash, nice to see you again as well. Fantastic. Absolutely, guys. If you guys had them right, and you other folks, if you were thinking of the pilot's ready room chats, well, pilot's ready room chairs, absolutely. And those are used by these guys here, okay? So kind of the first sort of jobs I want to talk about, the jobs that these guys did, okay? Now, these guys were the officers, so they needed comfortable chairs, not because they were officers, but because they were pilots. And as you can see in this room here, in this picture, they're all dressed up with their equipment, okay? Because, and they're getting ready for their commander to stand up in front of them and start to tell them about the mission that they're about to undertake. Because as soon as they're finished with all their questions and getting briefed, it's called, about their mission, they're simply going to take all their equipment with them, and they're going to head up the stairs and up to the flight deck and hop into the cockpits of their planes, okay? So this is where they spend a lot of time. You can think of it kind of sort of as a pilot's clubhouse, okay? Because underneath those chairs where they're sitting, the cushiony part, there's actually a little compartment in there where they can keep personal items, okay? There's also a little desk that some of you may be familiar with from some classes that you may be taking. They simply fold up and fold over so that they can have a surface to write on, because there was a lot of notes that the pilots would take. Okay, very good. Back to the chair exhibit, and I want you to tell me what chair, now take a look at all of these, all right? What chair do you think is the most scary? What's the most scary chair here? Or the strangest looking chair that you see here? What chair you think could fit that? And then try to think about what it could possibly be for. Let's see. Vash, the birdcase looking one, the birdhouse looking one. Well, yeah, that could be pretty scary. It absolutely can be pretty scary. But it's not the scariest looking one generally. If you were thinking about that chair, then you were absolutely correct. Now, what do you guys think that chair was all about, and who used that chair? I'll give you a hint. It's some of the guys who were doing the jobs that we were just talking about, okay? So yes, the pilots would use that chair. And if you were thinking it is an ejection chair, then you would be 100% correct. Now, we're going to talk about it in World War II. We're going to talk about chairs in World War II as we go along. None of those, by the way, in World War II. Those came about after World War II. And those were used, okay, I'll play a little exercise with you guys. So I want you to imagine you are a pilot, okay? And you're flying off the deck of the Intrepid. And something happened. Either you have a failure of your equipment, or if you were in a war, you may have been damaged in combat, right? No doubt you came out on top, though, in that battle. And if your plane was damaged, you can no longer control it, okay? Well, after World War II, if you're fighting, say, in the Vietnam War, you're simply gonna, and if you follow my laser pointer here, you're gonna reach down, I say simply, maybe not so simple, but you're gonna pull up that yellow and black handle, or on the top here as well, that black and yellow handle there, pull down on it, and you are going to be rocketed right out of your cockpit like you see going on here, okay? But before you get rocketed out, you see that glass canopy there that covers the cockpit, where in this case, the pilot and his gunner, which is the guy that's actually zooming out of that cockpit right there in the back seat, okay? That has explosive charges, and that's going to blow out of your way before that rocket ignites and you go shooting up out of that. But it didn't always happen, guys. And I want you to look at this picture. What's all this stuff? If you follow my laser pointer there, what's all that stuff? What do you think? Because, oh, and by the way, what's this guy wearing on his head? Very, very important. Okay, you see that blue there? Does that look hard or does that look soft? Because I'll give you a hint. In World War II, that would be soft, just a canvas helmet. But you don't have any ejection seats in World War II anyway. Right? If you were thinking it's hard, that blue helmet is absolutely hard, because guess what? If those explosive charges don't go off and that canopy doesn't blow off out of your way, you go right through that canopy. And that's what you're seeing there. That's all the debris there. So the canopy did not go did not go away, and that gunner did go right up through that canopy and left some debris behind him. Guess what? The pilot is likely to follow him right behind. Okay, so he's going to go through that glass too as well. Okay, cool. So let's get back to our chair exhibits and talk about some of the other chairs that we have here. Let's see. I want you to tell me the strangest looking chair. Maybe something that looks like a cage. Well, I kind of gave it away, didn't I? And this was the chair that Vash, that you guessed before was the scariest, okay? Looking like a birdhouse. So if you chose that one right there, you were absolutely correct, okay? You're guessing well so far. That is called the Highline Chair. Now, remember, when we were talking about in World War II, there are no ejection seats. So now I want you to imagine, if you will, you guys are pilots in World War II, and you're flying a prop plane, right? Like some of the ones that we'll see later on in the presentation. You lose control, there's a malfunction, or there's combat damage, okay? Again, from a combat that you had that you came out on top. You don't have those handles you can reach down and pull up or reach up and pull down that will ignite your ejection seat, okay, like we just talked about, this guy over here. You have to unstrap yourself from the seat. You have to reach up and pull back the glass yourself. And you have to climb out of that cockpit. And you're just going to jump right out of that cockpit. Okay, now you have control of your own parachute. Do not pull that parachute too early because you still have the tail of your plane to pass by. And if that rips your parachute, that could be a little problem. Okay, so such was the job that could sometimes happen with pilots in World War II. Let's say you do all that successfully and you go splash into the water, okay? Now, do you think you're flying off the Intrepid, remember? So do you think that the Intrepid is going to stop what it's doing, turn around and come and get you? I tell you what, if you think that that's going to happen, you may need to guess again, okay? The Intrepid is really kind of big and really very important, really kind of the centerpiece of the fleet of ships that it's sailing in. So that job is not going to be the Intrepid's job. That is going to pass to a smaller ship. A ship like a destroyer, which there will be many in a fleet surrounding the Intrepid, or even smaller, a destroyer escorts, which are even smaller than destroyers. Okay. So they come over, they sail nearby you, and don't worry, you're not drowning because you have a flotation vest, so you're gonna be pretty good. They throw over a rope ladder, canvas ladder over the side, and you climb right up the side. If you need any help, there'll be people that will help you, the crew of the destroyer. And then the destroyer will radio back to the Intrepid and say, hey, Intrepid, we have your pilot, Lieutenant X. And the Intrepid will say, okay, pull alongside. So it's up to that destroyer or destroyer escort to catch up with the Intrepid. Now, they're a smaller and lighter ship, so chances are they might be able to do this. But still, how are you going to get from that small ship up to the big Intrepid? Well, you might be guessing that they use the Highline Chair, and that's absolutely what they do. So what happens is the crew on board the destroyer where you are, they fire over cables using modified shotguns, a couple of cables, and the crew on Intrepid is going to catch them, and they're going to fasten them to the deck of the Intrepid, okay? And then the Intrepid is going to send over the Highline Chair. But wait a minute, not so fast. Remember how I was saying that the Intrepid had all these things that you guys see in your neighborhoods, in your on your blocks, even as you're walking through, right? A lot of the good things like the restaurants, bakeries, and guys, how about ice cream parlors, right? Let me know down in the chat if you have a favorite ice cream parlor you like to go to in your neighborhood. Let me know if you like ice cream, or actually, you know what? Who doesn't like ice cream? Just let me know if you don't like ice cream. And so that would be a lot less clutter in the chat. So they can say, wait a minute, you have ice cream parlors there on Intrepid? And we did, guys. We had two ice cream parlors, not just one. We don't have that any of that stuff here on the destroyer. So before we send over Lieutenant X, I want you to fill that basket, and you can look at the basket down there on the bottom of the Highline Chair. See that? I want you to fill that basket with ice cream, and I want it to be equivalent to Lieutenant X's weight. So yeah, they're kind of holding you hostage to get some goodies. But the crew on Intrepid, especially the ice cream parlor staff, is saying, and by the way, a job on Intrepid, is saying, yeah, we're used to this, no problem. So they're going to put the ice cream in there, and they zip down the Highline Chair over to the destroyer, and I say down because the Intrepid will be higher, right? They zip it down, and the crew on board the destroyer take it, and they open up the basket there, and they see all their ice cream. Now, before they get excited, they know that sometimes pranks can be played by staffs on board aircraft carriers to get their pilots back. So they're going to say Lieutenant X taste that ice cream just to make sure there's soap chips that haven't been shaved into the ice cream, right? Because they're both white, kind of, so they might blend in a little bit. Maybe they've poured hot sauce onto the ice cream. And who wants that? I love hot sauce, but not on my ice cream. So if Lieutenant X says it tastes good and gives it the thumbs up, or can at least pretend it tastes good, off he goes to the Highline Chair, and they're going to zip him right over to the Intrepid. So you see like a destroyer on the right side there of the picture, and you see the pilot there on his way back over to the aircraft carrier, okay? Now, keep in mind, both ships are probably going at full speed. They are in the waves. It could be a rather choppy sea, which means wavy sea, right? So your pilot, or you as pilot, might get dipped into the water accidentally or on purpose before you get back home. But you know what? It's better than going down in a crash. That's all about the Highline Chair. And by the way, celebrities to get from one ship to another used to use that too. They probably didn't get dipped as much as the pilots did. They even had double chairs, okay, double Highline Chairs if double celebrities or two pilots needed to use them, okay? Very cool. Back to our chair exhibit. What is that arrow pointing to right there? Now, when I asked you what the scariest chair was, you might have thought of that one. I kind of do. My apologies to anybody who has that profession and you're watching. But yeah, I'm just kind of one of those people. What kind of chair you think that is? Put it down in the chat there. It's the only one left. We've gone through a lot of the possibilities. And another very important job here that we had on Intrepid and other aircraft carriers that destroyers didn't have, by the way. So, by the way, if you had a problem of the kind associated with that chair, you would have to go over to an aircraft carrier to get this done, okay? If you're thinking it's a doctor's chair, you're close, but no cigar. That is the dentist chair, okay? Yeah, for me, it's a little bit scary. I just went actually last Friday, but it was fine. I have a great dentist. The dentist chair, okay? And one of the jobs here on Intrepid is, of course, dentist. Now, we had two dentists, and we had a couple of doctors, a couple of full-fledged doctors, and we had a bunch of medical techs and corpsmen, right? Like we like to call them here on Intrepid. All right. Oh, and by the way, also another job. I know that chair kind of looked like a barber's chair as well. Okay, so it was a similar chair that was used by the barbers here on board. Very, very important. You couldn't let that hair get out of control. It's all part of the Navy discipline. All right. Vashia, eyes and dentistry. Right. So doctors' chairs and dentist chairs. Fantastic. Good job. Okay, so actually I want to take this first pause here to see if there are any questions. If there are any questions at all, just let's see what we got there. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to put them over in the chat there. No questions? Okay, no questions. So we're just going to move on. And we're going to move on with a very special exhibit that we have here at Intrepid. Right? Look at that. Now, what do you think that is? I know it's an airplane. What kind of airplane do you think that is? Just put it down there in the chat. And I want you to take a good look at this aircraft and let me know what you notice about it. Maybe you're noticing certain features that it has. Maybe you're noticing that it has colors. Maybe you're noticing something down at the bottom there of that chair. It looks like we have a little bit of a lag here. I'll make sure I get that bigger for you. There you go, guys. Sorry about that. We have technical difficulties a little bit. Hopefully you can still hear me. All right, so once again, look at that aircraft. Let me know what you think that the job of that aircraft was. Okay. So yeah, actually, yeah, they would. So M Pink KSP, yeah, they would have done both. Okay, just like a dentist do today. If it necessitated that tooth to be pulled, they would have just done that. Okay, but right now let's take a look at that aircraft. This was called the Avenger. Okay, if you're like me and you love superhero movies, you watch the Avenger movies. So before we had Captain America, actually that's wrong. Captain America was from World War II. So before we had Iron Man, Thor, and the Hulk, this was our Avenger. This aircraft had one job only. That's to drop this Mark 13 2,000-pound aerial torpedo that I'm circling with my laser pointer on target with your enemy ship, in hopes that it will hit that enemy ship, make a big hole in it, maybe even sinking that enemy ship. Okay. And to do that, you had, well, let me ask you this question. While I'm continuing to describe the Avenger, how many crew you think were on this aircraft? You think it was just one guy? You think it was two? You think it was three? Yeah. Pretty big bomb. Actually, it's a torpedo, which is more like, there you go. It's more like a underwater missile. So let me know how many people. Yeah, I got one person that says two people were in there. Is there anybody that says only one person was in there? It may look like, you may not get an accurate size. Well, actually, you do see a person there standing in the picture. So actually, let me make sure. Yeah. So I guess you can get an idea of the size. Guys, these Avengers had a crew of 3. Okay. They had a crew of 3 in here. Now, where were they stationed? Okay. Well, one guy had this job. He was sitting in that. This is right behind the pilot. It's a gun turret, of course. And his job was to use that 50 caliber gun there to protect the aircraft against enemy fighter aircraft coming in while you're trying to drop that torpedo on the enemy ship. Okay. Yeah, you would be all crammed up in there if you were a turret gunner. All right. And you'd be firing that 50 caliber machine gun that is located 4 inches from your left ear. And you don't really use hearing protection. Okay. So that's going to be pretty loud for you guys. Where would the another crew member sit? Let's take a look at that. So yeah, there were 3 crew members in this Avenger, guys. And the next one I want to talk about, you can see the gunner's position right there. Of course, the pilot is sitting in the cockpit right there. The third member of the crew is sitting right about in here. And that is a navigator radio man. And he's constantly on the radio with the rest of his crew, the rest of the squadron, and the aircraft carrier that you came from, okay? But there were some Avengers that had this sticking out the back. What do you guys think that is? That's also another job that the navigator radio man had to do. If you're thinking that's a gun, that's true. It's a lot smaller gun than the 50 caliber here, but it was a 30 caliber gun. And some Avengers had that gun in the back there. And what the navigator had to do was fire that gun by laying down right on this area of the body of the Avenger. Okay, so it was another job there. Okay, let's take a look at the flight deck. Okay, let's go up to the flat top, otherwise known as that flight deck up on Intrepid. Okay, so what other jobs do you see in this picture and the one before it? Let me go back to that one there. What do you guys see in the jobs of what job are these guys doing? Tell me what you notice about these guys. So it's what you see up there. It looks like an aircraft, looks like a jet aircraft, right? Because I don't see any props up there. Color coordinated, fantastic, absolutely. Okay, guys, so the jobs of much of the flight deck crew were color coordinated. So if your job, and we're going to get into the specific job that these guys did in a little bit, but these guys here dressed in yellow, they had a certain job, and these guys right here in green had another job. Okay, and again, we'll tell more later. I'm going to talk a little bit about flight operations on board the Intrepid. Okay, do you think that the flight deck was a safe place to work or a dangerous place to work? Tell me in the chat what you guys think. Was it safe? Was it dangerous? You can get a clue here by this picture right here. Okay, there's a jet aircraft taking off from the bow or the front of the Intrepid. The planes are going to take off from the front. They're going to land in the back. Okay, and while you're thinking about that, I want you to take a look at the right of the picture and all of these guys that you see hanging out there. What do you think they're doing over there? Does it look like they have any equipment in particular that they're using? They're doing any specific job? I mean, besides getting out of the way of the wing of that aircraft, absolutely, they have to do that. Yeah, so if it looks dangerous, it was. It was not a very safe place to work. But you know what? You're highly trained, so you do know what you're doing, all right? And they do not put you up there until you do know what you're doing. But even then, there are accidents that still happen, okay? But not as many as you may think. In World War II, we're going to take a look at how aircraft launched right here, okay? You have these prop planes that you can see. One here is folded. That one is no doubt going to get unfolded and prepped for launch. You see one launching right here, okay? And another one launching here, or excuse me, folded up there. And no doubt they're going to get that one prepared to launch too. Now, what I was getting at in the picture before, and I want you to look closely at this guy right here, right? What is that piece of equipment that he's using? What do you think that is? And what do you think his job is? He's wearing a helmet, okay? Because yeah, we've already established working on the flight deck is pretty dangerous. Does it look like a gun he's got there? Binoculars. Not exactly close. It's only got one lens there, right? And by saying lens, I might have given it away. Not the rangefinder either. It's simply click. Many of us have these on our very phones, okay? Or we have a nice fancy model in our house somewhere. Maybe our parents do and have that. That's a camera, folks. Photography, very, very important job on Intrepid. Guys, these folks, these photographers, mates that they were called, chronicled everything, including takeoffs and landings, okay? All for the record. So that's what they were doing. That's what some of the jobs were. Some guys up here and in the picture before were gunners, because there were guns up there to protect the Intrepid from enemy aircraft as well. So a gunner is another job that we had up there too. Okay, let's talk about landing now, okay? You land, like I mentioned before, on the rear or the aft, okay, or the stern, it's called, of the Intrepid flight deck. But how do you land? Do you think it's all on your own to just, okay, you got to steer, make sure you're coming in on the stern or the rear of the Intrepid and then just plop down? You think it's that easy? You think you can just land whenever you feel like it and whenever you want? Nope. If you're thinking that, sorry. It just actually doesn't work that way. There's a whole flight deck crew dedicated to helping you guys, okay? To helping you guys as pilots land. And you see some of the guys there. These guys are LSOs, landing signal officers, okay? And by the way, a hint, these guys are going to be wearing white shirts, okay? So not like the yellow and green that you saw before. They're all going to be dressed in white. So that's a hint as to what they do. And keep all these things because there may or may not be a quiz at the end of the presentation, okay? Now you see this guy, he's using paddles. You see right here in his right hand, and again, of course, in his left hand is there, paddles. This is circa World War II. They had a little more sophisticated equipment here after World War II. But in World War II, this is what they would use. And you as an incoming pilot would hopefully get a good view of this guy. And he would tell you by different signaling how he puts the paddles, how he places his hands as to exactly how you're doing. Okay, for example, if he puts the paddles straight out, level, that means you're doing a great job and you're coming in just fine. If he raises the paddles up, that means you're coming in too high. Paddles too low, if he puts them down low, that means you're coming in too low, okay? It looks like he kind of has his left paddle a little bit higher than his right paddle. So that kind of means you're not straight. You're kind of tilted over to the left a little bit. So that pilot needs to straighten out a bit to have a better chance at a safer landing. And look at the guy down here, okay? He's got headphones on. What do you think his job is to do? Anything special with this piece of equipment? It's kind of hard to tell what that is, but think World War II, okay? Think olden days, okay? Even before me, even before I was born. Vash, fantastic. There you go. It's a radio guy. Okay, so he's going to make sure that the pilot is getting the correct signals from the LSO. Okay, fantastic. Okay, let's see. After World War II, for example, in the Cold War and in Vietnam, like I said, we had better technology. We still had LSOs, landing signal officers, but they weren't using paddles. They were using something way, way better, okay? Something called the Optical Landing System, the OLS, and the arrow is pointing to it on the picture there on the right side, right? Now what that is some lights that are going to be shown, and they're going to bounce back in a mirror. And coming in as an incoming pilot to land, you're going to see it. Your view is going to be like you see on the right there. Pardon me. Like you see on the right there, right? And you can probably see, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit better for you guys. If you kind of look closely in that red circle there, you can see a red dot, okay? And see where it says the meatball down here in the bottom? That's what they called it, the meatball. And the radio operator that's working with the optical landing system is talking to the pilot, and he's going to say something like, call the ball. Now, what he means is for the pilot to call him back and tell him exactly what he sees, because that ball takes the place of the guy with the paddles, okay? So if the ball is too high, you're coming in too high. Too low, you're coming in too low. You get the picture, okay? If he calls the ball right in the middle, he's coming in great and is likely to make a safe landing, okay? Let's see. You come in fine on the landing, but you only have the back or the rear third of that aircraft carrier to land on. How's that going to happen? Well, as you see here in the picture on the left, you see that jet. That's an A4 Skyhawk, which we used most commonly in the Vietnam War. You see that little stick kind of object there sticking down out of the tail section of that jet there. And in the picture on the right there, you can get a close-up of one. It's called the tail hook, all right? And do you see these cables that are stretched across the stern there? Those are 1.5 inch thick steel cables that are called arrestor cables. And if you're kind of getting the idea that the pilot has to grab onto one of those cables with that hook, well, you got it exactly right. Okay. Now, in World War II, there were up to a dozen of those things on the back of the Intrepid. So if you're thinking that's easy, well, you may think again. Certainly, it was easier than later on in the Vietnam War, where there was this many. There were 5. All right, 5 cables. So what you're going to do is you're going to hopefully plop down in time and in the right place to allow your tail hook to grab onto one of those cables. As you see the guy almost doing there on the picture on the left, and you're going to grab that cable. And when you do, as you see in the picture on the right, you can see the cable's a little bit raised up off the deck there. That's going to immediately shut down your engine, and you have made a safe landing, or what they call an arrested landing, because you only have a short 250-foot section of that flight deck to come to a landing in, okay? All right, so that's our landing, right? Again, arrested landings. Oh, by the way, if you don't grab onto one of those cables, right, those arrested cables, you always land at full throttle. So you're going to push up that throttle to full power. And this is true today as it was in the Cold War and Vietnam. In World War II is a little bit different. But there's a part of the aircraft carriers called an angled flight deck. If you miss all of those cables, because you have that angled flight deck, nobody should be in your way. And because you've throttled up to full power, you should have the speed to take off again, and you come back around to try that landing again, right? Sounds simple, right? It's a lot better than crashing into other planes or going too far on the flight deck, crashing into the island or endangering other crew. You might get ridiculed a little bit by some of the other pilots, especially if you do it more than once. If you do this, it's called bolting the landing. And if you bolt too many landings, if you become a bolter too many times, you might get sent back for further training, okay? Because you obviously are missing the point there to make your arrested landing. Okay, cool. Let's see. What else can we talk to you guys about? So I think you get to the idea that the flight deck not exactly the safest place to work on board. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at the island. Other jobs that were done on the flight deck. Now, in the picture on the left there, where you see the big number 75, you can see the island. Okay. If you think of the flight deck as the sea, the ocean, islands come up out of the ocean, right? So that's the island coming up out of the flight deck. Okay. And once again, by the way, look at that picture on the right there. If you need any further proof that the flight deck was a dangerous place to work, there you go. Okay, beware of jet intakes and blasts. And in World War II, not only in World War II, but also even as far up as Vietnam, you'd have to worry about props, okay, spinning as well. That would be another hazard up there. Okay, but what kind of jobs did people do inside the island? Let's take a look at some of those. Okay. Well, in the island, a big part of the island is something called the Combat Information Center, known as the CIC. Guys, just tell me in the chat there, what do you think these guys are doing right there specifically? What kind of things you think, or other jobs you think might have happened inside the CIC? Or what do you think the CIC was for? The Combat Information Center. Think about that name, and you'll get a hint on what was going on in that area. Radar, ding, 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 you got it. Okay, radar was one of the jobs that the guys did in there, right? In fact, those guys right there are working on radar. This guy right here on the left, kind of standing up, and he's kind of got like a see-through board. Looks like he's writing on it. Okay, that's a plotter, and he's plotting the positions of friendly as well as unidentified aircraft. And by the way, he's up there writing backwards with a grease pen. Okay, you have to learn to be a plotter. You have to learn how to write backwards. So that's another job up there. And Vash, you got it. Combat info, telling planes where to go, telling pilots that are in the air or about to get in the air where they should go because there's an unidentified aircraft approaching the Intrepid. So we send a couple of fighter aircraft out there to go see what it is. Okay, or they're telling the bridge and the captain and his crew, which we're going to talk about shortly, that there are unidentified aircraft coming in, and that the gunners should be getting ready to defend the Intrepid. Okay, all those jobs. Another job up there is cryptography in the island. Cryptography. If you guys have ever heard this before, just let me know in the chat. It's kind of an advanced, not such a common job that was known on board. Cryptography. It has to do with radio signals. Maybe radio signals not coming in from friendly sources. If you're thinking that sometimes some men on board encrypted comms, there you go, Vash, but not coming from friendly sources or from pilots or crew on board the Intrepid, but coming from possible enemies, okay? So you want to listen in, and these people are trained to try to break those encryptions or to try to break the enemy code. Because once you break the enemy code, you know exactly what they're talking about, right? Those guys had very important jobs up there too. Okay. Other things you're going to find up on the island is this place here. This is the navigation room, okay? So this is where the navigators, not just one, for the crew, are going to tell everybody where they're going, okay, where they should go. And then there's the navigator station. So up here, now this has been a little bit redone here for visitors on Intrepid because everybody likes to sit in the navigator's chair. That's not the original navigator's chair. It would be a lot more comfortable than that. It's just a wooden chair there. But what you are looking at right here, being circled by my laser pointer, is one of two main or primary compasses that were on board. So the navigator would sit up in that chair, or in a chair that would be where that one was, looking at that compass, so he would get a true heading, and looking out these windows. Now, in World War II, that would be open space, but it was enclosed in the Cold War, okay, to protect, I guess, that navigator sitting there in the rain and from the elements, right? And from there, he can see from the bow, which would be in the foreground of the picture, towards me, towards us, to stern, which would be all the way in the back, past those pictures in the back. You can see the stern right over there, okay? So that's some of the jobs that would very, very important on Intrepid, and specifically in the island, is the navigator, right? Check out this room here. This room is called the pilot house. What do you think happened there? And again, the name probably gives it away a little bit. The pilot house. Let's see. Do you think this is where pilots that flew the planes worked? Or do you think, not really, Vash, where the pilots hung out? Remember, we talked about their ready rooms, right? That is where they would hang out before and actually after missions as well. So don't let the name pilot fool you. Let's see, what do pilots do? What do pilots do? Do they control things? They fly the planes, don't they? So pilots fly the planes. So that clue of this being called the pilot house will tell you that something's being controlled here. Look at this here. You see that wheel, right? Maybe I need to zoom in a little bit for you guys. There you go. See that wheel there? Well, that's just the wheel that controls the entire ship. That's all. And the guy that's steering the ship is called the helmsman. Okay. Sometimes referred to as a pilot, not very often, okay, because you don't want that confusion going on. So this room is the bridge, okay. So people don't recognize the pilot house as much as the bridge. So the pilot of the ship, you got it, Vash. Fantastic, okay. So here you'll have the helmsman steering the ship. Behind him, you'll have a supervisor watching what he does. That's how important that job is. Next to him, manning this piece of equipment here, all right, is the lee helmsman. And what he's doing is he's sending signals using this piece of equipment down to the engine room, telling the ship's engineers another job, very important here on Intrepid, right? The guys who keep the engines running, how fast and in what direction to take the ship. Okay, not so much what direction, but how fast to take the ship and in what direction, I should say, forwards or backwards, okay? So that's all about the bridge up there. But where's the captain? Where do you think the captain would be on a typical day in the Intrepid? Put it down there in the chat. Let me know if you have an idea where the captain may be. Now, he is the captain, and he's the head of the ship. He's controlling the whole ship, so he can probably be wherever he wants to be, honestly. But if you think you know where the captain would normally be, let me know in the chat. If you think it's here in the bridge, do you think the captain's steering the ship? Now, a lot of people do think that, but the captain doesn't steer the ship. As we've already said, it's the helmsman. The captain would be at a place just outside the walls. You can kind of see it a little bit here through this window. Oh, pardon me, guys. He'll be in a place that looks like this, and he'll have one of the absolute most comfortable seats on the entire ship right here. That's where the captain might be. And again, enclosed windows here during the Cold War era and the Vietnam War. During World War II would be open. So you'd probably find him out here on nice, sunny, warm days in the Southeast and the South Pacific. Hanging out there. You can see he's got equipment next to him and in front of him, and he's not just sitting there chilling. He's actually performing some important functions, and he's monitoring what's going on in the ship. See this area right here? It looks like a mirror, doesn't it? That's exactly what it is, okay? Because he's facing the front of the ship, so he can easily see planes taking off, but he can't easily see planes landing. Remember, they're landing in the back. So you can just look at that mirror, and he can see them. He doesn't even have to turn around. Okay, some of the jobs done there by the bridge crew, including the captain. Right? Do we have any questions? I do want to pause here to see if there are any questions that came up. Okay. Was one person in charge of steering all the time? Okay. You may think so, even by the description I gave you, that the helmsman was in charge. No. Okay, we had a bunch of different helmsmen. The typical Navy shift of duty would be 4 hours long, right? So you go 4 hours on, 8 hours off, 4 hours on, 8 hours off, right? So a helmsman might be standing there steering the ship for 4 hours, and then somebody would jump in there and take his place at the end of his shift, okay? And if you're lucky, you got the morning shift, so that would give you a full night's rest. But if you were a lower rank guy, chances are you pulled some of the late night shifts at the helm. Okay. Any other questions? That was a good one. How fast can the Intrepid travel? That's also a good question. Now we're talking about the bridge and the engine room, right? The Intrepid at full speed would bring you at about 32 knots. By the way, let me know in the chat there if you ever heard that term knots, okay? Because that is a measure of speed over water, okay? Aircraft also use it when they're flying sometimes as well, especially over water. But it's a measure of your speed when you're on the water, so ships use it. It's a very naval term. 32 knots, or 1 knot, let me say, is about 1.11 miles per hour, okay? So 32 knots is about 38, 39 miles an hour, if I have that math right? So that'll give you a better idea of how fast the ship went, okay? It was considered pretty speedy back in its day. A ship like the Intrepid would go exactly that fast, okay? And considering that ship weighed about 42,000 tons, okay, think about that number, 42,000 tons. To be able to go 38 miles an hour is not too bad, not too bad. Oh, and by the way, guys, ships, aircraft carriers today, even though that they are up to 3 times as heavy as the Intrepid was, and about twice as big, right? And they're nuclear powered. They have not 1, but 2 nuclear reactors to run the ship. They still go about 32 knots. Okay, so we seem to have topped out. But that's an achievement because it's a lot heavier, okay? All right, very good. So guys, I want to talk a little bit now, a little bit closer about flight deck jobs, okay? How do planes get from the hangar deck where they're stored up to the flight deck? You're looking at one of those ways right there. Aircraft elevators, okay? So just as a little hint for future reference in this presentation, maybe there will be a quiz. It's the guys in the blue shirts, okay, that are going to run the elevators, okay? And they're also going to tow the aircraft from the hangar deck onto the elevator like you see here in the picture. And once it gets up to the flight deck, tow it off the elevator and put it in place, okay? This is our port side or left side aircraft elevator. Yeah, and it took, oh, by the way, only 7 seconds to get from the hangar deck to the flight deck. And if you come to visit the Intrepid, you can take a ride on that port side aircraft elevator. It's not going to be 7 seconds. We slowed it down a little bit for you. And you'll hear from one of our volunteers or one of our other experts up there, one of our educators, telling you all about the experience of riding the elevator if you were one of those blue shirts, or yeah, if you were a pilot, and all about that elevator. Okay, other jobs on the flight deck. Well, not all of them were so glorious, okay, or glamorous, I should say. Swabbing the deck, okay. Look at all these guys. This is, you know, there's a good variety of our flight deck crew up there, okay, all in their different colored shirts. Most of them are green, I think, but there's a lot of red in there. It's looking a little bit like maybe Christmas time there. They're called Skittles, okay? And if you're a candy fan, and who doesn't like some candy here and there, you might have eaten Skittles somewhere along your years. And I think Skittles are pretty good, the fruit-flavored candies, right? So they're called Skittles because of different colors. So yes, part of keeping the ship in good condition, in good working order, is making sure that flight deck is clean, okay? You can't get dirt build up on there that might interfere with landing or with taking off aircraft, okay? Not everything was glamorous, all right? I do want to, for one quick second, take you back onto the hangar deck and show you these guys here. A very important part of working on the hangar deck is doing exactly what these guys are doing. What does it look like these guys are doing? Tell me in the chat if you have any idea what they're doing in there. They're working on what looks like an Avenger there, but does that Avenger look like it's in flying condition? Probably not, no, especially with the guys look like they have all panels open up here. You can see the engine panels have been opened. In particular, there's even something that the guy looks like he's stepping on with his foot there that's been opened, okay? So Vash, you got it again, it's repairs. So a very, very important part of working on the Intrepid or on any aircraft carrier was working on the hangar deck and repairing these aircraft. Now, sometimes it was just a matter of maintaining them so that they can stay in working operating order. And sometimes it was repairing battle damage. Okay, and sometimes it needed to be done rather quickly. So who are these guys? These guys are mechanics. They're avionics experts that are working with the instruments up here in the cockpit. Okay, they're working on those instruments. Those guys are called avionics techs, electrical technicians of all kinds. Now, another place inside the Intrepid that you can also visit when you come to visit is this place, okay? This is an area called the anchor chain room. It's up in the front, the inside front of the Intrepid, called the forecastle, right? And in this room, the anchor chain room, just like it sounds, right? You can see Intrepid's two big, painted in black here, anchor chains, okay? Those anchor chains right there. Okay, how did you drop anchor? Well, what were the purpose of the anchor? The anchors are, of course, to hold the ship, like Intrepid, in place so it doesn't drift in the current, okay, if you wanted to hold it. They weren't used very often. Like, for example, when they came into port, they would be, how the Intrepid is today, tied or moored to Pier 86. But to drop that anchor, the order would come to the bridge, from the bridge to these guys working in here to let go. Now you see this one guy, he's holding a rope there. See this other guy with a sledgehammer there, big hammer. And you see, if you look real closely, maybe I'll zoom in there for you a little bit. You see that that piece of apparatus right there? He's going to slam, the guy with the rope is going to pull out a pin. That's a safety pin. This guy's going to slam that clip with that sledgehammer, and it's going to let loose that chain, and the weight of that anchor is going to drop that anchor and pull the chain and drop the anchor, of course, into the ocean. Okay, in a nutshell, there, anchor operations. The anchor, once it's pulled back up on board the Intrepid or to the hull of the Intrepid, and by the way, when you come to the Intrepid, make sure you take a look at Intrepid's two big anchors sitting out there on the hull, okay? Because there are a lot of people miss those, right? Because they're worried about getting the tickets, getting something to eat maybe, getting to see the right place, maybe seeing a tour or things like that. These little chains on the side here called stopper chains, those are going to hold the chain on board, okay? Make sure it doesn't fall out again. And when you do come to Intrepid, you're going to see the anchors. This is exactly what they're going to look like, okay? How much do you think that these anchors weigh? Put down there in the chat how much you think these big anchors weigh. And again, we had two of them. And remember, the Intrepid weighed 42,000 tons, okay? And while you're thinking of how heavy they may have weighed or may have been, check out these guys. And how would you like to have their job? And what do you think they are doing? I will tell you that they're about 65 feet or so, about 60 feet or so up off the water, okay? So it's a little high. So you can't be afraid of heights if you're going to do their job, right? This one guy here looks like he's chipping something off of that anchor, okay? Yep, Vash, he is cleaning that anchor. This guy here, he's got a can here. You can see this guy's can is waiting for him to finish chipping off that stuff, whatever it is from the anchor. What do you think they're doing? If you think they're painting the anchor, absolutely, guys, right? So they're cleaning and painting that anchor. And by the way, if you came up with, okay, we have a few tons at least, 2 Indian elephants. I think they're probably, Indian elephants are a little bit heavier. 2 of them would be heavier. 15 tons, 15 tons, okay? 15 tons, and we have 2 of these guys to hold the Intrepid in place. Okay? So back inside, you can get a good wide view here of our anchor chain room, okay? You check out these red things here, these red machines. It kind of looks like the chain is wrapped around it there. Give you a better look here. Yep, the chain is indeed wrapped around. That is called a wildcat, okay? And they're being pulled from 2 decks down below, okay? 2 decks down below is where the majority of the chain is, in something called the anchor chain locker room. It's going to be coming out of this white area here. Oh, and by the way, check that out, right? Anybody a fan of Roadrunner? I don't know if I'm aging myself there, but If you're a fan of the Looney Tunes, you recognize the Roadrunner. So sometimes our guys, when they had some time, they would just do some art. It's called sailor art. It's original, all right? And we have this frame around it so we can keep it looking good. So when you guys come, you can walk in there and see there's at least 3 pieces of sailor art inside our forecastle. Right? Okay, let's see. So back to the ink and chain room. Oh, other important jobs on board, guys. The mess hall. Where did that word mess hall come from? And what does it mean? Well, from the picture here, you might think it means where the people ate, where the crew ate. Yep, absolutely. It's actually from the French word, okay? The French word mes, M-E-S, which meant portion. So when the guys had mess call, you could say they were doing portion call. So they were getting called to eat their portion of their meal. Okay, 3 square meals a day. Of course, someone's got to cook these meals, okay, in these things, the galleys. Remember, I told you way up front in the presentation that we had 2 of these guys, 2 of these rooms, kitchen. Okay, galley is the naval term for kitchen. Okay. We had 3,400 men here in World War II, 3,200 about in Vietnam by the time that war came along. If you think it was an easy job to cook for all those men, well, think again. Maybe you do like cooking, but check out these guys. The one on the left there, look like he's cooking up some pork chops or maybe sausage. I can't get a good view of that there. The guy on the right there looks like maybe he's got chickens there in the basket. So if it seems like the guys ate well, you definitely got that. Okay, but we got more jobs here, very important jobs. A Navy only runs on its stomach, right? So you have to have somebody to cook. You can almost smell the freshly baked bread already, okay? You need bakers, and remember we had 2 bakeries as well on board, and cooking buns and rolls for 3,400 men, a big job also, okay? So baker, another job on board the Intrepid. So I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that the Intrepid was active in the space race as well. So the Intrepid was the recovery vessel for 2 space missions. In 1962, they recovered astronaut Scott Carpenter in the Mercury 7 mission. And again, in 1965, they were the recovery vessel for the Gemini 3 mission that had these 2 astronauts on it. We have Gus Grissom here on the right, on the left, and John Young here on the right, okay? So they needed somebody to go fish them out of the water. That's exactly what the job of the Intrepid was. So a lot of guys' jobs changed on that day, on those days, to do things that they wouldn't normally do every day, like take a space capsule out of the ocean, okay? Help these astronauts get on board, right? Help them get out of their spacesuits and into normal clothing. And speaking of bakers, guys, look at this, cakes. If you're like me, you love cakes, right? So when Gus Grissom here in the front and John Young there in the back, when they landed, after they got cleaned up, they got into real clothes, or I should say their suits, their everyday normal clothes. They had a celebratory cake to commemorate, to celebrate the occasion of the very successful Gemini 3 mission. So it was so big, you couldn't just take a knife to it. So what Gus and John here are using are some officers' swords, okay, the ceremonial swords. So they're cutting that cake. And so cakes, if you're thinking just by the size of it, you can probably think that it was an important part of life on board Intrepid. It absolutely was. Look at these guys. These guys are putting the finishing touches on Intrepid's first anniversary cake. This is when Intrepid was 1 year old. Okay, so this would be on August 16th, 1944, right? And does that look good to you? I don't know. It's supposed to be the Intrepid. You got a kind of a flight deck here on the front there. I should say I do know. It looks good. I probably would have eaten it up and probably would have tried to hustle another slice or 2 out of the guys for this cake. So baking, even cakes, which is something, probably a lot of you people might like to do, your parents might like to do. If you think it's easy, well, you might think so by looking at this recipe. It says easy chocolate cake. But as you start to read down the recipe and think about it and imagine 3,400 men, you'll probably come to the conclusion it's not so easy, okay? This is for 100 portions, okay, for 100 men on the crew to eat. There were 3,400, so you got to take this and make it 34 times and then put it together to make an easy, quote unquote, chocolate cake. Okay, so most of the jobs, I would say, not so easy on board Intrepid, and the job of baker also not so easy. Again, this is the first anniversary cake, but they had one for the 25th anniversary. They had one for the 50th anniversary of the Intrepid. Actually, no 50th anniversary. What am I saying? For the decommissioning ceremony in 1974. These cakes would weigh about 700 pounds, guys, and they'd be way too heavy for these two guys, or even more help to carry. So they had to put it on the bomb elevator and bring it up to the mess deck where the guys could cut into it and eat it from there. All right, guys. So like I kind of hinted at, we're going to have our quiz now. I hope you guys are paying attention. Let's see if you can get 100% on these questions before we close out the presentation. You've got a good idea on the literally hundreds of jobs that could be found on Intrepid that the 3,400 men did. So here's my question to you. If you look at this picture here, both pictures, which color do you think was worn by the guys preparing a plane for flight? Do you think it was A or B? Sorry, M Pink ASP. Yeah, we got that quiz for you. So just put it down there. What do you think? Which one of these colored shirts you think is in charge of preparing planes to take off? Is it A or B? We got some answers coming in. Any other answers? 3, 2, 1. Time's up. Okay, I see some B's over there. The correct answer, A. Okay, A's are wearing, now he may look like he has a kind of a red shirt on, but he's really wearing a brown shirt. It's probably just with the lighting here. He's called a plane captain, and plane captains are absolutely the last ones to keep that particular plane. For every plane, there is one plane captain, and he's in charge of maintaining that plane and getting it back into flying shape. Okay? Yeah, Bosh, you got it. All right, let's go to the next question here. Which color is in charge of refueling? Is it A, the red shirts? Is it B, the purple shirts? Give us your answer down there in the chat. Which colored shirt has the job of refueling all those aircraft? Okay, and there were up to 100 aircraft in World War II. Vietnam, more like 60 aircraft. But by the time we're in Vietnam, we're talking about helicopters as well as jet aircraft. Let's see, I have all B's. You guys are too smart. If you said B, that is absolutely the correct answer, B. The guys in the purple shirts, all right? Although, looks like we might have a woman here. Because remember, today, up to 700, maybe even more women serving on aircraft carriers today. So the purple shirts are the jobs to refuel those aircrafts. And so what else is purple? Maybe a fruit? Something that you eat, maybe for a snack, something that's very healthy for you. That would be the nickname of these folks, these guys and gals today that wear the purple shirts. What else is purple? It's very tasty. If you were thinking grapes, that's exactly right. So these guys are called, affectionately so, grapes. That's their nickname. By the way, the guys in the red shirts there, they're in charge of doing exactly what they look like they're doing. They're putting bombs on an aircraft there. So they're ordnance men. Very good. Okay. This next picture here, which is in charge of catapults and arresting gear? Okay, I let this one out of the bag a few minutes, a while ago in the presentation. Which guys here do you think are in charge of the catapults, which are launching the aircraft, and the arresting gear, which we went over to help aircraft land? You think it's the blue shirts on the right, A? If you think it's the guys in green on the right, B. So the blue on the left. If you think it's them, right, A. I can't fool you guys, okay? If you said B, that is the correct answer, okay? So those are plane handlers. They're handling all those things I just said, plus also cargo. When they get supplies by air, they're the guys that are in charge of bringing that, unloading those planes and bringing it where it should be, okay? One last question, guys. Let's see if we can all get this one. You guys are doing pretty well. Which is the aircraft handling officer, okay? Also, they direct aircraft, like where to go. Flight deck is a pretty busy place, so you need a director there, right? If you think it's the guys in the yellow shirts, put down A. If you think it's the guys in the white shirts, put down B. Okay. Again, aircraft handling officers are also going to be aircraft directors. Okay. They direct them where to go. Oh, we have some different answers there. Okay. It's like 3. I'm going to give you 3, 2, 1. If you said A, you are correct. That is the answer right there. Aircraft handlers in yellow. Remember, I talked about the landing signal officers in white. Okay. Also, med techs, medical techs, and guys who are trained in first aid would be wearing white because, again, dangerous place to work. Right. Hey guys, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to do these Intrepid adventures for you guys. Remember, consider supporting us if you will, and you can hit that link down in the chat. I'm going to ask Jonathan to put that up one more time. If you're interested in what's coming up next, you can also check that link, which I'll have Jonathan put up for you in the chat as well. And we will see you next time, okay, on another Intrepid adventure. Actually, join us next Thursday, okay, for another Intrepid adventure. Have an excellent weekend. Bye, guys.